Good morning. Welcome to another Schoolhouse for Art conversation. I'm Lana. I hope everyone is well. I hope everyone has had a little bit of an opportunity to let creativity flow into their days this week. I am delighted to be sharing these conversations. I'm so grateful for all the artists that take time out of their busy schedule to talk to me here so that we can share these conversations. Today, I am chatting to Eilbhe Donovan. Eilbhe, when I saw her work, stopped me in my tracks, and I really wanted to look closer. I wanted to see. What she does. I haven't seen much of that kind of technique around, and I really wanted to learn more. She exhibited with us in the Schoolhouse in December, and she was so great, so gracious at giving me so much information about the process of what she does and how she does it. And it just, it was really, really interesting conversation. And so much so that it progressed into her then creating a workshop to do with us in the Schoolhouse later on in the season. And then to have a chat with me here this morning. So I know I can see she's online. I'm very excited to sit down and have a chat with her this morning, where she's going to explain a little. You can check out Eilbhe on eilbhedonovan.com. Good morning.
Hi. How's it going?
Hi. I'm great. How are you doing?
Not too bad. Good. It's
Good.
Friday. Yay.
It is Friday. Yay. Thank you so much for having a chat with me this morning.
No problem.
Yeah.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's been great to get to know you over the last couple of months. What you do a little bit differently from artists that I've spoken to. Well, you've done so many shows overseas, mainly in Switzerland, Denmark, the States, and then a little bit closer to home, which I know you're busy working for, is the show you have coming up in Cahir Arts in Tipperary.
That's right. Yeah. First one in Ireland for a while.
Yeah. How do you manage with an Irish name like Eilbhe abroad?
Sure, it's difficult enough even here.
I know. I had to ask you a few times. I was like, how do we spell it? Yeah. And that's terrible. So
no, people are normally curious, and first of all, the interesting thing is when people see the name, they don't know whether I'm a woman or a man. Or they don't know how to address me in correspondence and things like that, which is kind of interesting. But no, they're pretty gracious, and they ask how to pronounce it. So I always say BH is a V sound, and then they kind of get it. But easy,
okay.
Yeah. Give the example of Siobhan, just the same.
Yes, true. Where they try and separate the BH.
Yeah, exactly.
So how are you doing? How are you at the moment with all of your process and getting ready for shows?
Yeah, I have recently just kind of worked out to go to another show in Zurich. So that's nice, because it's always lovely to get back to Zurich. We have people that we know there, and I have customers there, so it's always nice to go back. I would definitely push people, if they were interested in exhibiting overseas, to give it a go. It's quite different, and people are always interested in talking to you because you're from a different place. So, and you meet people from all over Europe. So it's really, I really enjoy it. Actually, one of the shows, there was a lot of people coming over from Korea and Japan.
Wow.
Yeah, and they were interested in my work because it's got a Japanese feel to it, kind of Chinese. Yeah. Japanese with the ink work and stuff like that, and all paper based. So we had good conversations about that, and about sourcing kit, like Chinese calligraphy brushes I use, and paper from China and stuff like that I wouldn't otherwise find out about. So that's really great,
Yeah. It's interesting to sort of, because obviously the natural thing to do is to approach your local market, your national market, and say, here is my work, can I exhibit here? And if you got no's at that point, then you would, I don't know, a lot of people might just say, well, that's me done, I'm not going to make it as a professional artist where I can make some money. but actually to encourage people to look overseas and consider other galleries outside of Ireland.
Yeah.
You know, not to give up at the
No,
nose that you might get locally.
absolutely not. And the interesting thing is, one of the main differences that I find when I've been in shows here and when I go overseas is, especially in Switzerland, if you think about the Swiss, they're very fastidious and their methodology is very precise, you know, so they're always asking me about my process, always. And the difference in Ireland is that they like the subject, which I do a lot of coastal scenes and birds, and so they like that maybe, but they don't really ask about the process. They just assume I'm using watercolor in my painting, and I'm not. So that's quite interesting. So I started writing a little sign on my displays saying ink, so that people know I don't use watercolor, I use ink. Everything is ink, printing ink and acrylic ink, you know.
Yeah.
Because
Well,
it's annoying when somebody just assumes it's something else. It's like, no,
oh,
it's
well,
not.
I'm glad then that I came up to you at our exhibition and I wanted to know all about the process, because you know it's different to a lot of the work that we see. You know, it you have a different technique. It's not a very you know, it's a practice that's done, but it's not as common as other techniques. So I wanted to know all about what you do and how you do it.
Well,
Um,
yeah, I do two processes. One is ink painting, and the other is monoprint. So I'll talk about the monoprint first, because
yeah.
that's what the workshop is about.
Oh yeah.
We'll
Yeah.
do an ink painting workshop in the future. Who knows? But
Yes, definitely.
but the monoprinting, I think a lot of people don't do monoprinting because well, there's a couple of things. One is that I have a press, and a lot of people don't have that fortune to have their own press.
Hmm.
I was crowdfunded a press, so that's really nice. So I'm going to bring that up for the workshop. But ordinarily, you don't have access to a press. One doesn't have access to a press. I happen to be lucky for that, and it's 1 meter by 1 meter 50. And I think it improves how a monoprint looks. You can do a monoprint at home. So when I do this workshop, you can absolutely do monoprints yourself at home, but you won't be able to run it through a press. And running it through a press gives you the nice edge. I have a sample here. It's quite big, but you probably can't see it, but there is an edge on it here.
Oh yeah,
And
gorgeous.
there's an
Yeah.
indentation because the paper is wet. So that gives it a nice finish, which I rather like. But it's not necessary. You know, a monoprint is basically a picture that's done on, let's say, a plate. So the plate could be anything flat, can be cardboard, can be glass, can be, I use acrylic sheets, perspex kind of thing. It could be anything. And you draw or paint a picture onto that, and then you flip it and print it onto something. So essentially, you don't need a press. You know, you can
Hmm.
just press it down and go over it with a little roller or something, and you'll get an effect. But the whole press, rolling it to the press and wetting the paper gives it this nicer finish. It just brings it up a little level, you know. So there's many different types of monoprinting. I use one where I do my picture on the plate, but sometimes people can put ink on the plate or whatever they're working with, and then they actually turn the plate over. Let's say if it's something thin, like thin acetate, turn it over onto the page, and then draw on the back of the sheet of the plate, and then that'll print out onto the other page. That's another type of monoprinting. So monoprinting, and also what people find maybe a little bit confusing, is when people hear the word print, they think multiples of.
Yeah.
And mono means one. So there's only one print because your plate, which I keep talking about, is cleaned afterwards and therefore blank. So it's not like you've etched something in. So that if you've etched something into a plate, for example, and you print it off, the same image is on there, but with maybe different colors, a different paper, whatever it is. But
Yeah.
the same image is on there. So basically that's one of 20, or depending on how many you print off. Whereas in monoprint, you can only print once, because the next time you wipe your plate clean and it starts again. So there's a protocol in how you sign everything as well, which I love all that. It's all very kind of technical and interesting. And then when you get into printmaking, further into printmaking, which I could talk about another time if anyone was interested, you start looking at chemicals and how they bite into copper, and it's all about chemistry, and I just love that. You know, there's lots of science behind it. That makes me excited.
And if you had an etched piece of a plate, an etched plate,
Yeah.
and but you probably couldn't ever reproduce the exact same thing
No, but it's
twice.
still part of a series because you're using the same plate with the same
Okay.
equipment. Yeah. So you would say at the beginning, you would say, right, I'm going to do 25 prints off this plate, and then I destroy it afterwards.
Okay.
Yeah, and the first couple that you might experiment with before you finish scratching it would be called AP, which is artist proof, and that's just you printing it off to see, okay, do I like this, do I not? And that's not part of the series. Well, it is part of the series, but it's not part of the numbering. It's all very definite and precise and that kind of thing. So it's kind of nice. But I just get frustrated when people think print equals, you know, something that's commercially made. It's like, no, a print is actually a long process. You
Mm.
know, inking it up, wiping it off, running it through, getting the paper, the correct dryness, wetness, all of that stuff. It's just really interesting. And then you have the randomness of the fact that when it comes through the press, you're not exactly sure how it's going to look like, even though the rest of it is very precise. So I love all that mix.
Yeah.
Yeah, you never know really what it's going to look like.
And that's why then you'd have all the labeling and terms to put against the work to really show the formal art of the print, that it is,
Yeah, that is one of
has
one.
gone through a process.
Yeah, and it's one of a kind.
Mm-hmm.
Each monoprint is original. So people get confused with that print, original, what? You know, but it's a one-off print. So the print is the manner by which you produced it, as opposed to you've made a picture and then you're doing a print of it 10 times, you know.
Sure.
Yeah, so that's the kind of difference. So in the way that I do it, I use this paper, which I just showed you there, and it has to be etching paper that I use, or some kind of paper that can be wet and dried again and not lose its strength. So
Okay.
you need really, really strong, good quality paper, and etching paper is the best, I find, because etching paper needs to be soaked and afterwards retain its strength, but it also is smooth enough to maintain a fine line, you know, whereas watercolor paper can take the water, but it's bumpy usually, but
Sure.
paper not, but it's able to keep a sharp line, and that's what you need in an etching if you think about it.
Mm.
Drawing. So I use etching paper and I put it in a bath. So you put the sheet of paper in a bath to soften the fibers somewhat, but not too much. So I leave it in the water for, I don't know, enough time. I'm not sure. I just know how it is. And then you take it out, hang it up to dry so that it's not too wet, not too dry. And then with my plate, I tend to use etching inks when I'm rolling up. So the etching inks, and I use oil-based because I like the way oil mixes with water, but it's more chemistry again. You don't have to. Again, if you wanted to do it at home, you could use water-based inks. I just prefer oil-based inks. And so I have an image that I might be working on that's kind of in my head. Usually it's coastal scenes. And then I use little rollers. I use a thin ones like that size. They're brayers, same as what you would use for relief printing, would be etching or lino or something like that. And I roll it on, just thick oil-based ink, roll it onto my plate. And then afterwards, I might have a couple of colors, but not very many. Usually I have one or two. And then afterwards, I use a little bit of spirit, white spirit, which will break down the ink, and it kind of starts loosening a little bit and moving around the plate a bit. And I'll manipulate that with anything that I have. I have a box of old bits, and it's like anything from feathers to paper to handles of brushes to sponges, something that you want to make marks, to make pattern, to draw your picture a little bit more. I sometimes use old hard brushes, or toothbrushes is quite nice, or scrim. Scrim is a fabric that you use to wipe off ink in print, and it's got a nice texture to it. So I use all those things until I've got some kind of image, almost like a background. For me, it's like a background of something that I'm happy with. And then the paper should have been somewhat wet, somewhat dry, because it's been hanging up. And then I put the paper onto the press, and put the plate onto the press, put the paper on top, and roll it through the press. And when it comes out the other side, of course, it's a reverse image. And then see what it looks like, you know. And afterwards, there's one here. I'm not sure how you can see. Can you see that?
Yes, it's stunning. Yeah.
There's some birds on there. So
yes.
The birds, actually, if I hold it here. So the lines were done, these kind of background lines would have been done with the oil-based ink and put through the press. And afterwards, I would have added in these birds, painted them in. So that's how I do it. It's kind of a step-by-step process. So the first process is actually, as I said, kind of creating a background, as you like. And afterwards, I add on bits. And I'm a bit obsessed with birds. So it's nearly always going to be birds.
Yeah, but yeah, I know that you study them. You get to know, like, you really get to know your subject.
That's right. Yeah, I do a lot of sea kayaking. And my husband does the photos. So as I said, I also do paintings, and they're definitely more bird oriented. So the monoprints are kind of like the background for the birds, like coastal scenes, and then I'll put some birds in generally. But he and I go off together, and we go to bird sanctuaries and reserves like the Salties. We paddled out there in a kayak a couple of summers ago. It's about 12 kilometers out there and back. Wow. And then we went out there to the gannet colony and saw the puffins and take a lot of photographs. He takes the photos, I watch how they move, look around, get a feeling for the place. And then I go through the images when I get back and use them as a base for my painting or my printmaking, whatever I'm doing. So yeah, we definitely are there, you know. This particular one is the estuary in Timoleague, which is a great wading bird area. So those ones are, I haven't written on it, don't I? What are they called? Godwits. Yeah, they're godwits, those ones. But I like when people can recognize the birds. So
well, yeah, you can see, like, there's distinct qualities that you put into each of the, you know, you can see that there's been definite consideration for what bird you're actually putting into the scene.
Yeah.
And what medium do you use to paint over the monoprint then? You know, to put the birds in. Is that?
I use acrylic ink, and I have a huge big array of different colors of ink, because acrylic is a little ink anyway in terms of on top of watercolor. Ink is a bit different from watercolor, and I mean, will I explain what's the main difference?
Yeah,
I don't know if people know. So watercolor will reactivate again if you're using it and you want to go over it, whereas ink is fast. As soon as it dries, it's fast. It's not going anywhere. So it's a little bit, well, I think it's very unforgiving, but I like it. It's got a little more strength and vibrance in color. And there's also a lot of metallics, although I have heard that watercolor has metallic now, but it didn't before. And I like a lot of metallics. But anyway, it's a little bit stronger in that sense. The pigment is a bit stronger. So I use that with a sword liner brush or a rigger brush, a really fine brush, and I use pipettes as well. So I might take wet a piece. This is partly how I do the other painting. I might wet a little shape. So I might draw my bird, wet a little shape with water, and then with the pipette, drop in the ink. And because it'll only stay where the water bubble is.
Yeah.
You know, and then because there's oil-based ink on the monoprint, sometimes the oil separates it. So I don't know how you say it. It's like a little ball that moves around, you know, because it's on top of an oil-based surface.
Okay.
You know, so you have that randomness as well as the precision. And so you never know quite where the little ball is going to dry, the ball of ink, if that's making any sense.
But you must have to, you like, I mean, you don't leave too much up to fate. And in terms of what these mediums will do, and then you'll have a considered technique where you're putting it down on the paper and saying, this is in general where I want the mark to be.
Oh yeah, yeah, absolutely. But it still will dry of its own accord.
Sure. Oh, I know what you mean. Yes, so you can see within the surface where the main body of the ink has dried. Amazing.
Yeah, so it's quite it's unpredictable in that sense, and I rather like that. So the brushes that I tend to use are huge, big calligraphy brushes. Actually, I don't have one up in the studio, but really big calligraphy brushes, and then really tiny, really tiny sword line or rigger brushes. So there's kind of nothing really in between. I just use huge brushes and tiny brushes. And then I also would put pencil on the top, but I use ink pencils. So again, it's ink. I love these pencils. They're by Derwent, and they're called Inktense, and they're just a little bit stronger than watercolor pencils. Watercolor pencils aren't as vibrant, you know.
Okay.
The ink pencils, they're activated with water, or you can leave them without. So what I tend to do is I would sharpen my pencil with a blade, because they're very soft, really sharp, and then do my lines, because you can be a bit more free with a pencil than you can with a brush. And then I just go over with a sword liner with water on it, to make this really sharp line. And I quite like that. Yeah, yeah. So that kind of work doesn't work on surface or bumpy watercolor paper, for example, because it's very smooth. The paper that is very smooth. I buy it by the 10-meter roll. It's 1 meter 55, so it's nearly as tall as me, and then it's 10 meters long. So I just pull it out and tear it down to whatever size I want, which is I can't work in exactly the same size sheets. I don't work that way. I would love to be able to have that. Oh, an exhibition, they're all the same size, but no. I don't know, I can't. The subject tells me what it's going to be, not the paper size, so I kind of work the other way around.
Well, because I know, I remember at the exhibition you have different frames that yeah.
And each one is framed differently, depending on the size, depending on the color. So I'm really awkward,
You're decisive. You know what you want.
Oh, I do. That's the problem.
Oh,
yeah.
But and that was one thing that struck me when I was looking at your work closely at the exhibition, was how many layers of techniques there were.
Yeah.
Like, in part of that process. And when you were telling me about it, there's some parts of the process that are really, they felt very loose and sort of flowing. And then there was very precise, more detailed, smaller parts of the element. Is there part of the process that you prefer?
I don't know. I like the looseness. Let's say when I'm painting a bird, so this is going back to painting again. So the birds that I paint are very, very big. So that I start off with a piece of paper torn from my roll that might be 1 meter 20 by 1 meter 20, and then I just do the shape. Let's say the section of the bird. At the moment, I'm doing a very big heron. And that was from photos that my husband took when we were on a recent trip away. So I'm doing, let's say, the chest, and I get my big calligraphy brush, and I do a couple of air drawings.
Okay.
2 air drawings to get the sweep, because it's a sweep, because they're big. So I have to get the sweep of the shape of the body of the chest, let's say. And I know that, let's say, the front of the chest is going to be some particular color. So I do that sweep with a big brush, and then fill it all in with water. And it's quite difficult to see where I've put the water. You kind of have to lean down and look at the page, because it's hard to see where the water is. And then mixed up inks in a tiny little receptacle. And then I get my pipette and I drop the pipette in, or I get a long pipette so I can drop in a long piece of ink. In other words, a bigger piece, a bigger drop. I don't know how you call it, piece, drop. And you just drop it and pull it in the direction of your water, but you're not touching the water. And then when the ink goes into this big water bubble, because it could be about that size, I don't know where it's going to go. It'll go within the water bubble the way that it does, and that's the bit that's always like, I wonder what it's going to look like,
Or
I just did some yesterday, and I just went up this morning because I don't know until it dries how it's going to dry. So there's that bit that I love, and then mostly it's okay. You know, sometimes you think, oh, I should have done this or that, but you can't do anything afterwards.
Sure.
You know, ink is that's it. Once it's down, it's down. You can't go over it. You can't work it in. Not the way I work because it's quite minimalist. So yeah, it's like one shot only.
I think it remind like the fact when I was learning more about you and how passionate you are about conservation and wildlife and nature, um and then you're talking about your work and where you have to leave a little bit up to fate, or letting things do what they're going to do. That's the same in nature, that you have to, that it will do what it wants to do to a certain
Mhm.
degree. So the fact that that's part of what you do in your art, I think it's very, it's very complimentary. It makes sense that that's sort of how you work, that you do leave the sort of mediums to work together by themselves for a little bit.
Yeah,
Like in nature, birds will be birds and they'll do their thing, and then the nature and the wildlife around it will also have their sort of impact on
absolutely.
the area. And I suppose to that point, you are very passionate about conservation and wildlife. Is that was that sort of an early childhood thing, or was that is
Yeah,
that
I always got memberships to Birdwatch Ireland from my aunts.
ah wow,
And watching books and things like that since I can't remember how long, you know, they're all very passionate about it. So I think it came from there. And sometimes I'll go out and I'll automatically know what a bird is when I'm wandering around, and I don't know how I know, you know. So
amazing.
it's just been part of it, which is kind of interesting. And also we have yeah, we have loads of bird books, but we go specifically now. It's definitely more a conscious decision, I suppose. Like the last holiday we went on, work holiday, I call it, was I got a residency in Costa Rica, and I chose there because of the diversity of wildlife, particularly birds. And so we went over with the cameras and everything else, and took amazing shots. The heron that I'm currently doing is actually from a boat trip down a river called the Tarcoles, and there was kind of trips to go down there and do bird watching, and there was crocodiles. The kids wanted to see the crocodiles. I was more interested in birds, but anyway.
Yeah,
Um,
I would be also.
so that was cool, and they're so much closer over there. You know, you can really get very close to the birds to get really good photos. We have decent cameras and lenses as well. My husband takes the photographs, and I've got some amazing pictures. And hummingbirds, we took a load of hummingbird photos. Now they are really difficult to photograph because they are the size of the thumb. They
Yeah.
are really teeny, and they're so fast. It's like trying to photograph a butterfly, you
Oh my
know?
God! Wow.
So there's a couple of those, and I mean, I don't know how many thousands of photos we have to go through since the trip, but and then we went down to another place called Osa, which is a reserve, and we stayed in the forest in the jungle for a couple of nights, and saw monkeys, and we saw a jaguarundi, which is like a jaguar, but smaller, and people don't see them. That was actually really amazing. So I might start doing animals because we've got pictures of now we've got photos of monkeys and anteaters, and I can't remember what else we saw. Oh, these little guys called quati or something. They're funny little things. I don't know what they're like, a
That's
or
incredible.
something. So yeah, all of that
That's
stuff.
amazing.
Yeah.
It's amazing that you bring those. So even when beyond the process of the work and how you do what you do, and it looks so beautiful there on the wall, or in the exhibition or in the show, and then to hear the story, something as exotic as that behind the work just brings an even deeper level to what you do. Yeah, so that's incredible to
Yeah.
that it's not just a photograph that you found in a magazine. You've actually been there and almost touched them.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the funny thing is we went to a big zoo in Lisbon a couple of years ago, and there was Danny had my husband had the camera, and he took a bunch of photos of various different birds that we were going around looking at. And I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't use any of them because
Oh,
they weren't in their natural habitat. I looked through the photos and I was like, it doesn't speak to me because
yeah.
I didn't experience it. They weren't in their, yeah, in their right habitat. So yeah, it doesn't work. But there's so many places around Ireland, you know. I mean, when you go on a sea kayak, you see it from a completely different perspective. We were lucky enough to be able to kayak the Cliffs of Moher 2 summers ago, and that doesn't happen very often because it's usually choppy and
Yeah.
there's
Can't.
nowhere to come in. You know, you have to do it in one go.
Yes.
So that was amazing. We had puffins flying right at you over the head, you know, just coming at you. These little tiny,
Oh,
so cute.
ah, that's amazing.
That's really nice. Yeah,
That's amazing.
it's like you're in another world because I mean the Salties as well is like being in a David Attenborough movie. It's just oh my gosh, it speaks to me. It's such a beautiful, beautiful place, and the puffins when you go at that time of year, it's May, June. You can get really close to just see them because they're ground birds. You know, they have burrows in the grass, and they're just there. You know,
Wow.
hopping around and diving off the cliffs, and there's just birds everywhere. It's incredible. It's just
Oh,
it's not our world, and it's really nice to be part of it, you know, like
yeah, it's their world, and it's lovely that you kind of visit it, respect it, and then try and capture it in the work that you do
yeah,
to
yeah.
let us have a little bit of a taste experience.
Well, go to
Uh,
the Salties. That's what I would say to anybody if they're wanting something that feels out of this world and it's not that far away. You know, you can take a boat out there or you can paddle out there in a kayak if you want, but
oh, well,
you need to have a good day. We were blessed with the day, so it was great. But no, there's loads more places to explore around here. It's a great excuse as well to kind of find interesting places. You know, it's like, okay, where will we go next? Well, the next place I'm thinking I'd like to go to is Namibia, because there's quite good birds there, or Ivory Coast in Africa, or something like that. But you know, the places that you tend to pick are a little bit unusual.
yeah, but that's lovely. I mean, it's better. It's a lovely angle to approach a holiday choice as opposed to the size of the swimming pool or the weather,
Yeah,
which I know a lot of us would be more inclined to choose. But it is beautiful to think of the, to go there to respect and capture the wildlife in the
yeah,
area is,
yeah.
it's a lovely way to look at a holiday choice, a holiday destination.
Yeah, and you get amazing photographs afterwards. There's not very many of us,
Yeah.
but there's lots of really interesting things that we saw, birds that we saw, or whatever, or maybe the sound at night, particularly in Costa Rica, you know, the howler monkeys and stuff like that. That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
You know, but it's, yeah, I mean, that's, I don't know. It's great to be able to take the love of nature and put it into, you know, bring it outside of just an experience. You
Yes.
know, that's really nice. That's really nice,
Yeah.
you know. But if people come and do the monoprint workshop, they don't have to do birds. They don't have to do.
Yeah, I know, but it's amazing. Like they could bring an experience, it's lovely to think if somebody was, if flowers were their sort of passion, or if there was trees, or, that you can bring subjects to the monoprint,
Oh yeah,
or you can just see how the print works and have an experience of that process.
yeah.
Um,
And as I said, people can do it at home. It'll just be perhaps without the press. But although you can buy little small presses that
yeah,
aren't expensive. I mean, my one was a couple of thousand, so that's not what everyone's going to want to invest in. For example, you need the space for it as well. But you can buy little tabletop ones that are a 4 size. I think I have a small one that I don't use because it's too small for me. But actually, that's not a bad idea. Maybe I'll bring it up. It just tends to
yeah,
table. It needs to be clamped. But I could bring that one up as well. And then there'd be a second one, even though it's tiny. But
yeah. But I guess to show people the progression of what to use, and even if they don't have the press, that they can spend a few months experimenting without the press
yeah,
to
you
see
can.
if these techniques are do represent the work that they want to do,
Yeah, absolutely.
um
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
then investing in a smaller print press and going from there.
Yeah, I mean those little small ones, as I said. Well, when I bought that one, it was €200. I mean, it wasn't breaking the bank. And I've had it for years. I used to bring it to schools and stuff like that to work with the kids. Actually, I was teaching in Myanmar, in Burma, and I brought that press over.
Okay. Oh, wow. So
Yeah.
it's small enough to go in the suitcase.
Yeah, I just have to break it apart because it's heavy because it's a metal base on it. But yeah, no, I remember now. I brought it over to Myanmar for the kids because I was so passionate about printmaking.
Oh,
I
really great.
decided that my students had to learn how to do print.
It's lovely. It's lovely to be able to share what you do because you do it so well.
Yeah, yeah. So
I know we're really excited to have you over. Like it's great to be able to include some printmaking in the schedule that we have. So we're delighted to have you join us in April. So I know, yes, the 29th and 30th of April you'll be with us for your monoprint workshop.
yeah.
And then before that, I wish you well for your show in Tipperary.
Yeah, if
Um,
anybody's interested in coming down, I don't have the exact dates yet because she hasn't come back to me with exactly, but it's in April. I would say April, May, so go for the later part. Yeah.
yeah, I would love to have an opportunity to go
It's a
to
lovely
go there.
gallery, actually. She has
Yeah,
amazing
yeah,
work. Yeah.
it looks beautiful. I'm checking it out here um to see if they have any information up, but not yet.
No, she was funnily enough in Costa Rica at the same time as we were, but we didn't see her.
Ah, well, that's a
Yeah,
coincidence.
yeah, yeah.
Ireland is small, but we do
I
get
know.
around. We
Yeah,
do get around.
absolutely.
Yeah, well, look, I would love to make it out there when your show is up and running, and I will see you in April.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Anna.
Thank you so much. Thanks for everybody who joined us this morning and listening to our conversation. We love sharing these chats. Have a
Okay.
great day, Eilbhe, and I'll keep in touch and we'll chat soon.
Super. All right.
Bye. Thanks, everyone. Thanks for listening. Bye bye.